All right, let's dive right into this explainer and get you geared up for your newest role in 7th grade English. Basically, you're about to become an information detective. We're zeroing in on the different types of nonfiction out there and, crucially, the source-based model. If you've ever looked at a really complex article and wondered, how on earth do I pull the absolute truth out of this? Or, how to prove your points without a shadow of a doubt? Well, you're in the exact right place. We're going to break down the standards that will literally shape how you read, write, and speak this entire year.
Here's the blueprint for today's investigation. We are going to quickly cover the shift to nonfiction, break down the source-based model, look at evidence-based reasoning, talk about analyzing an argument, and wrap up with transfer practice in action.
Moving right along to Section 1, the shift to nonfiction and why informational texts matter now.
Okay, so check out this data, because it's actually pretty wild. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAP, reading framework for 8th grade, a massive 55% of your reading diet is now informational text. That means well over half of everything you'll be reading in class is nonfiction. It really proves that real-world knowledge is taking center stage. It isn't just about reading stories or poems anymore. Actually, to be truly college and career ready, you have to know how to sift through the absolute avalanche of information we face every day. The standards demand that a huge chunk of your reading is now going to be literary nonfiction, historical documents, scientific data, and technical texts.
That brings us to Section 2, the source-based model, which is basically your new detective toolkit.
So, what exactly is the source-based model? Well, it's a framework where your reading, writing, and speaking rely strictly on gathering information, ideas, and facts directly from source texts. The crucial takeaway here is that you can't just rely on your own guesses or outside assumptions anymore. Your case has to be built purely on what the text itself provides. It's kind of like a courtroom, right? A lawyer can't just stand up in front of a judge and say, "Well, I feel like this happened." No way. They have to present actual exhibits, documents, transcripts, the whole shebang. In 7th grade, your exhibits are the texts you read. The literacy standards insist that whether you're writing an essay or speaking up in a class debate, everything you say must be anchored in the facts and ideas you gathered explicitly from your sources.
Let's illustrate this difference, because it's super important. Look at how an opinion-based statement compares to a source-based statement. An opinion-based statement, which relies on personal feelings without textual backing, might sound nice. You might say, "I think the author is trying to say that storms are scary." But a source-based statement, which is rooted in specific, cited textual evidence, is so much stronger. It sounds more like this. According to paragraph 3 of the text, the author illustrates the destructive nature of hurricanes by detailing the specific wind speeds and property damage. Do you hear the difference there? One is just a feeling. The other? It's an undeniable, fact-based observation rooted entirely in the text.
All right, let's move into Section 3, evidence-based reasoning, or as I like to call it, finding the clues.
I absolutely love this quote from the Common Core State Standards. It says, "Students who are college and career ready value evidence." It's so simple, but it perfectly highlights the ultimate goal of your education right now. You are learning to truly value and demand evidence in literally everything you read. The standards specifically picture a successful student as someone who cites specific evidence whenever they offer an interpretation of a text. You have to use relevant evidence to support your points, making your reasoning crystal clear to whoever is listening or reading.
So, that begs the big question. How do we actually prove our claims, like a true investigator? When you're staring down a really complex, dense article, how do you extract the exact proof you need? Because, let's be honest, finding evidence isn't just about taking a yellow highlighter to a random sentence. It's a highly strategic process.
The 7th grade standards demand action, so you're going to want to follow these 3 steps. Step 1, read closely for explicit facts. Step 2, make logical inferences. And Step 3, cite several pieces of textual evidence. In earlier grades, finding just one detail might have been enough to get an A. But now, the standards explicitly require you to cite several pieces of textual evidence to back up your analysis. Because, one clue is never enough to close the case. You are hunting for what the text says outright, those explicit facts, but you're also making logical inferences. You're reading between the lines and piecing together clues to figure out exactly what the author is implying.
Now, as you're hunting for all this evidence, keep these specific 7th grade targets in mind. You need to determine 2 or more central ideas, provide an objective summary, and analyze interactions between individuals, events, and ideas. Let's break that down real quick. A 7th grade text is complex. It usually has way more than just one main point. So you have to determine two or more central ideas and actually track how they develop throughout the whole text. Then, when you summarize it, it has to be an objective summary. That means your personal opinions and biases, leave those completely at the door. And finally, analyzing interactions. How does a specific idea influence a person? How does a historical event shape a new idea? Your evidence has to explain those really complex relationships.
Moving right along to Section 4, Analyzing the Argument, or Cross-Examining the Text. This is where we hit the absolute highest level of detective work. When you're evaluating an argument, you basically have to put the author on trial. You do this by looking at specific claims, sound reasoning, and relevant evidence. First, identify the specific claims. What is the author actually trying to prove? Then, check for sound reasoning. Does their logic actually make sense? And finally, look at the relevant evidence to ensure their facts directly support the claim. The standards require you to delineate and evaluate these claims. You aren't just passively accepting whatever an author writes. You have to constantly ask yourself, is this reasoning valid? Is this evidence sufficient? Does this data actually support their point, or are they just trying to distract me? Honestly, this kind of critical reading is your absolute best defense against bad information.
And it gets even more interesting when you have conflicting witnesses. Analyzing multiple accounts means you compare how two or more authors writing about the exact same topic shape their presentations of key information. The standards are super clear on this for 7th grade. Two authors can look at the exact same historical event or the same scientific breakthrough and choose to focus on completely different things. Your job isn't necessarily to play judge and decide who is right and who is wrong. Instead, you need to analyze how they distinguish their positions. Ask yourself, how do they organize their ideas differently? What specific words do they choose to shape their tone and meaning?
Finally, we've made it to Section 5, Transfer Practice and Action, taking your skills into the field.
The standards explicitly state that you need to apply this source-based reading in history and social studies, science, and technical subjects. This means these literacy expectations are a shared responsibility. The source-based model doesn't just magically turn off when the bell rings for English class to end. The framework we've been talking about today, reading closely, citing several pieces of evidence, identifying central ideas, putting authors on trial, that is exactly what you'll do when you're reading primary sources in history class or analyzing lab results in science. The ultimate goal here is for you to become a self-directed learner who can independently navigate the staggering amount of information in the real world.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. Now that you have the source-based toolkit, how will you use evidence to investigate the information you face in the real world every day? Because as you step out into this incredibly information-packed world, you've got to use your new detective skills to separate fact from fiction. You now know that to be truly college and career ready, you have to demand proof, analyze reasoning, and rely strictly on the text in front of you. The toolkit is all yours now. It's time to start the investigation.